Welcome for all of you whose cell phones are either on airplane or turned off completely. My name is Phil Kiesling, former Oregon Secretary of State, and we're here today gathered in reflection and commemoration. All of us united, be we Democrats, Republicans, Greens and Libertarians, Independents, none of the above. We are citizens, all of us, of Oregon, other states, even other countries, here to honor and thank a fellow citizen. We didn't always agree with Secretary Richardson, but we were inspired and impressed by an independent mind and a fierce fidelity to follow his true North Star setting, putting aside partisan concerns, personal views, to do the job right. Someone for whom the notion of public service was stitched strong and lasting in the warp and woof of his soul. Many roles and titles Dennis Richardson enjoyed in life: son and soldier, spouse, father, grandfather, parishioner, teacher, attorney, state representative, and Secretary of State. But as he came to the capstone and the end of his life, what really impressed so many of us of all walks of life was that one honorific that perhaps he cherished most of all, and for which we deeply appreciate, celebrate, and honor his life today, that of a public servant. Thank you, Citizen Richardson. Please stand for the presentation of the colors, and please pass your hand over your heart as the casket comes by. Please remain standing for the opening prayer.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, you have called your servant Dennis home to rest in your loving arms, and our hearts are torn. Place in our hearts a sadness, while in other parts of our heart we rejoice because we had the honor, privilege, and opportunities to enjoy and experience Dennis's kindness, love, and wisdom. As we celebrate the life and legacy of your son, who loved his family and served the people of Oregon you entrusted to him, let us feel your presence with us now and in the days to come. Amen.
I would now like to introduce Erica Baldwin, the 2019 Oregon Kid Governor, and Don Peters, the 2018 Oregon Kid Governor, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now my pleasure to introduce Reverend Dr. Deborah Brown. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. I'd now like to introduce Asia Woolery, Secretary Richardson's granddaughter, who will now sing "Come Thou Font of Every Blessing." Yes, please be seated. Please be seated.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Sorrowing I shall be in spirit till released from flesh and sin. For what I do inherit, hear thy
We'd now like to introduce Dr. Leslie Cummings, the acting Oregon Secretary of State.
Hello, thank you for joining us today to honor a great leader and a wonderful friend. Secretary Richardson was a man of distinction who served Oregon humbly and with a very grateful heart. He was a beloved husband, father, veteran, and public servant. I had the pleasure of knowing Secretary Richardson for the last 7 to 8 years, the privilege of working with him daily for the past 2 years, and the ultimate privilege of spending time with him during his final weeks and days of his life. During these final days, Secretary Richardson continued to provide Secretary of State direction while he came to terms with this terrible disease. I was impressed with his positive attitude, his focus on others rather than himself, and his thankfulness for the blessings that was afforded him in his 69 years on this earth. I know it bothered him that he could not personally thank all those that had made his life special over the years, but I assured him there was little doubt in the minds of anyone who knew him how much he cared for them and appreciated all of those that he came in contact with. If Secretary was here right now, he'd be giving thanks. Thanks to God, whom he loved and served with all of his being. Thanks to each and every one of you. Your friendship, your support, his public service career in the legislature and Secretary of State's office. Thanks to his family, especially Kathy, the wind beneath his wings. Thanks to his beloved family, Scott, children, Jennifer, Valerie, Rachel, Nikki, Marie, Laura, and Elisa, all who meant the world to him. And thanks to the 221 Secretary of Staff that provide services and support us each and every day. Even in his final days, Dennis struggled to share his great appreciation for our wonderful staff and to make it clear to them how valuable they were to him and to Oregon. He especially appreciated his leadership team, and he would want you all to know them. Deborah Royal, Chief of Staff and Communications Director. John Hainan, Digital Media Specialist. Doris Halpin-Reyes and Steve Fast, Office Management and Administration. Larry Morgan, Civics and Diversity Engagement. Steve Elzinga, Government Affairs and Legal Liaison. And our directors, Steve Trout, Elections, State Archivist, Mary Beth Herkert, Peter Threlkel, Corporations and Small Business, Kip Memmott, Audits, Tasha Peterson, Human Resources, Jeff Morgan, Business Services, and Roland Rivera, Information Systems. Secretary would often share that each of these professionals were the best in each of their respective areas. When challenges arose or new ideas emerged, these are the folks that would assist in finding optimal solutions, implement them, and see them through to completion. The accomplishments of this leadership team are too many to address in the short time we have today, but they were significant, and Dennis would want you to know that. Secretary was a leader. He had a vision for the agency to serve the people of Oregon with all of our hearts, knowledge, skills, and abilities to ensure transparency, accountability, and integrity in our government. Also with him came his values. We value the people of Oregon, our staff, our customers, our partners, our stakeholders. We value the character of Oregon: liberty, equality, equity, loyalty, honesty, security, diversity, and sustainability. Secretary modeled this vision with enthusiasm. In fact, we often called him the Energizer Bunny. He would be in the office ready to tackle things from 7 in the morning till well after 7 in the evening. And he would often call in the wee hours of the morning, excitedly sharing the next great idea and asking us what we thought. His energy and enthusiasm was infectious, and soon we found ourselves following suit. He wore us out trying to keep up with him. Secretary's commitment to service was so strong that even in these last days, when he had to cut back on his schedule, he continued to lead the agency and think of the people until his last breath. Secretary was also a friend. It was imperative to Dennis to know you. He would ask what was important in your life, ask about your family, and learn what skills and knowledge each one of us had. He would then share your whole life up to this moment, specifically prepared you for the job you're about to do. And then he would say, I only hire world-class people, and would encourage you to align your talents and knowledge to your new position, and then say, expect extraordinary results. Yet this belief was only the beginning. He was there for you in your planning, in your preparations, in your challenges and triumphs, and he was especially there for you in your need. For me, it was the first week on the job as deputy when I received the news that my son had been killed in a work-related accident. Dennis immediately stepped up, as an older brother would, and held me together. He prayed for me and provided the gentle encouragement I needed to get through. He helped my family humbly and quietly, even setting up chairs at the funeral without having to be asked. I'm sure many of you have stories much like this that you could share about Dennis. Finally, the secretary challenges us. He leaves us with a personal motto of pro tanto quid retribumus ringing in our ears. His legacy of always aiming high, expecting excellence, moving fast, and doing what's right for the people is ingrained in all of us who are left here to continue his good work. Again, it has been my greatest honor to work with such an incredible leader and wonderful friend. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for a life well lived, a life that mattered.
Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to bring to the podium Governor Kate Brown.
Good afternoon. I'm truly honored to stand here today and share a few words about Secretary Richardson as we come to honor his life and career service to the state of Oregon. Dennis's first priority was always to his wife of more than 45 years, Kathy, his 9 children, and 31 grandchildren. I know Dennis was a devout husband, father, and grandfather to you all. On behalf of the state of Oregon, we are holding you all in our hearts at this time. I know he loved you dearly. As many of you know, Secretary Richardson and I were on the opposite ends of the political spectrum. But I feel like that's what makes me uniquely positioned to talk about what it was like to work with him. Regardless of what side of the aisle his colleagues sat on, Dennis's kind heart guided him and his work. He always treated me and all our fellow lawmakers with kindness, respect, and civility. This is his legacy that I will always remember, and it's a very important one in today's world. Dennis embodied what it means to be a dedicated public servant, hardworking, passionate, and wholeheartedly committed to making Oregon a better place on behalf of those he represented. Many of our state's public servants share these values, and so I like to think that his legacy will live on through all of our work under the ideals he shared with us. His reputation for perseverance not only guided him through his fight with cancer, but it also gave us all reassurance that he was fighting cancer with the same determination that he brought to work every single day. And fight he did because he loved being Secretary of State. He ended his journey in statewide office as our Secretary of State, but he started in Southern Oregon. So while his roots sprang from the southern part of our state, his reach extended to every Oregonian by the end of his career. He led a rich, colorful, and fulfilling life. Oregon is a better place thanks to his service to our people and his love for our home. We mourn today the loss of a wonderful human being, a true Oregonian. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Brown. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Congressman Greg Walden from Oregon's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman Walden.
Thank you very much, Phil. To Kathy and the entire Richardson family, Malene and I offer you our deepest sympathies during this difficult time of loss. You have been in our thoughts and in our prayers during this painful journey, and you will remain in our hearts in the weeks and months ahead. 2 years, 2 months, 7 days. That's when we last gathered in this historic chamber to celebrate Dennis Richardson as Oregon's 46th Secretary of State. For those on my side of the aisle, we also celebrated the arrival of Oregon's first elected Republican Secretary of State since Norma Paulus left office in 1984. Governor. So what a sad irony, then, that Oregon would lose both of these strong, independent leaders in the same week. Both Norma Paulus and Dennis Richardson were transformative figures who used the great talent of the state's auditors to identify shortcomings in taxpayer-funded programs. And both headed elections divisions free from political influence that made sure every Oregonian's vote counted, and each held accountable those hostile to democracy who failed to respect the integrity of Oregon's election laws. In short, they stood up for the integrity and honesty and gave Oregonians an election process they knew they could trust. God and family were the deep wells from which Dennis drew guidance and strength. Monday in Central Point at the church service, we heard from friends and business associates about Dennis's character, about his risk-taking, and certainly about his love. We were uplifted when his grandchildren, all 31 of them, joined their voices in song of praise. Dennis knew how to get things done and how to achieve his goals, but he also knew how to give back. His longtime law partner, Kelly Anderson, told the story of how, as a freshman at law school at BYU, Dennis found a grammar expert and then organized students to help them with their writing. He and Dennis got to move out of the basement of the law school, Kelly said, the law school library study area, after their freshman year at BYU, and moved up to the second floor where they could see outside and see light, and students had their own cubicles, and it was indeed a bright setting. As Kelly settled in, he said he got comfortable with his new cubicle, and then he looked around for Dennis to find him, only to discover somehow Dennis had negotiated a private office. You see, Dennis knew how to get things done and how to achieve his goals. But he also knew how to give back. His motto, having been given much, what will you give in return, is something that Dennis Richardson lived every single day. He had a plan for life The first half he would dedicate to family and to his law practice, and the second half to public service. From the Central Point City Council to a dozen years here in this legislature, to the 2+ years as Secretary of State, Dennis always gave his best in the great cause of public service. He proudly wore our nation's uniform as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He led with calm courage. He gave back when his country called. Several years ago, I remember Dennis talked passionately about the need for a Veterans Memorial in Central Point as he went about his plan to get one built. You know, if there were a Hall of Fame for the tenacious, he would certainly have been inducted years ago. Today, the Oregon Fallen War Heroes Memorial in Central Point contains the names of some 6,000 Oregon service members who have died in the line of duty from the Civil War to the present. And while we who gather to honor their service each Memorial and Veterans Day will not hear Dennis's voice this year, we will always see how he gave back in return, and we will remember fondly his love and his devotion. Having been given much, what will you give in return? Dennis Richardson, a kind, caring, and thoughtful friend, a wonderful public servant, and a deeply loving husband, parent, and grandparent. His quiet competence and civility were a rarity in today's world. Dennis served his country and his state with honor and dignity, and the body of his work leaves Oregon better for the next generation. Godspeed, Dennis Richardson.
Thank you, Congressman. Now my pleasure to introduce a fellow Secretary of State from the great state of Washington who served along with Secretary Richardson, Kim Wyman.
Thank you for inviting me. I think when Kathy invited me, she didn't know I was a weeper, so I'll just get that out of my system right out of the gate. Okay, thank you. Due to geography and circumstance, I didn't have the opportunity to spend much time with Secretary of State Dennis Richardson, But like many of you in this room, I wish that I'd had more time. I met Dennis by phone in early 2016. We were both on the ballot, and he was running for election. I was running for re-election. And we had one thing in common. Well, we had many things in common. We had one important thing in common. We were both Republicans running in very blue states. Not totally sure what we were thinking, in fact. But when you serve as an elected official, and I know many of you in this room know this, candidates will frequently call you and ask for your advice. Typically, those calls go something like this. They tell you how great they are. They tell you how they're going to win election, and they tell you about their really spectacular resume. This call from Dennis was different. He wanted to know about my experience running in 2012 in Washington. He listened and asked informative questions so he could understand and learn from my experience. When I asked about his political resume, he nonchalantly said that he had run for governor. Once again, he was unlike any candidate I had met. He spoke of that race in terms of the lessons he had learned and how it had prepared him to run for Secretary of State. Not a single bad word about his opponent, about the other side. No disparaging remarks. He only focused on the positive. It was unlike any political conversation I've ever had. And what struck me most about him was his humility. We'd have many conversations through the years, and each one would have the same tenor and tone. Each would remind me of the principles that I try to emulate. Dennis joined the Association of Secretaries of State in 2017, and that was the first time I got to meet him at our annual conference. I was impressed with his quiet leadership, his collaborative style, and the wisdom he had from his years of public service. In just a few days, I could see that he was going to add a great deal to our association, bringing positive energy and substance. He'd be a leader of his peers because he was knowledgeable, thoughtful, and respectful. Shortly after our annual meeting, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was blessed to have another statewide official in my state, our Chief Justice, Mary Fairhurst, who had also been diagnosed and served in public office with cancer. And when I met with her, we had a discussion, and she said something very powerful to me about her take on battling cancer. And she said she didn't like that term because while we all fight, it's such a win-lose paradigm. You either win or lose the battle. So she always wanted to approach it as a journey. And it's a journey none of us would choose, but it's another part of our life that we get to experience. So embrace it and enjoy the journey as much as you can. These words changed the way that I approach my own illness, and I can't read a single thing on this sheet of paper, so bear with me. I'm confident that Dennis walked his own journey in the way that he chose to. And I know that I learned many lessons watching him in his brave path forward. In January, I lost both of my parents within 4 days of each other. And like my cancer treatment, I had many people reach out to me in different forms, sending me their prayers, giving me flowers, sending me cards. This card was the most meaningful. I received this from Secretary Richardson. He wanted to comfort me in my time of loss, in the final days of his journey through cancer. It told me everything about his character, and it will always be an example that I will take with me of how to live my life. So, Godspeed, Secretary Richardson. Know that your legacy will live on in so many of us. You were so loved, you are so loved, and you taught us great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now my honor to introduce State Senator Betsy Johnson.
At a state funeral, it's inevitable that some in attendance will imagine their own memorial someday. Which of their political enemies will suddenly discover the deceased's wisdom, their integrity, now that they're no longer around to make trouble, or at least audit them? Dennis would have appreciated the kind regards of his colleagues, but he would have kept it in perspective, however. While the legislature is sometimes compared to a dysfunctional family, we were not the family that Dennis placed first. We were close behind, though, because Dennis loved Oregon. He wanted the occupants of this building to do their best so that the whole state would benefit and prosper. I first spent real time with Dennis when he invited me, a much less senior Ways and Means legislature and a Democrat, into the inner sanctum of budgeting. When I expressed an opinion, I genuinely believed he listened. We also had something a little unusual in common: helicopters. I used to tease him. While he flew over hot, steamy jungles in Vietnam with people shooting at him, I flew over magnificent Mount St. Helens. There is a certain rigor and discipline required in aviation that I think probably served the Secretary of State well. I cannot begin to imagine what a pilot needs from a team in a time of war, but I can tell you what I expected from my team during peacetime: trust, absolute trust. When you get in a helicopter that somebody else has worked on, You need the confidence that the team did their job and took care of the machine. Whether you're flying over a jungle or the breathtaking Cascades, you have to be able to trust that the team did the work and did it right. Lack of trust has become one of the disappointments in the legislature, and Dennis wanted to restore confidence. In an unusual occurrence, the same week we lost Dennis, we also lost former Secretary of State Norma Paulus, another Republican and the first woman to occupy a statewide constitutional office. Norma blazed her own trail and was one tough cookie. It was a dangerous time. She took on the Bhagwan Sri Rajneeshi sect when they tried to hijack a Wasco County election by bringing in homeless people from Portland to vote. Norma earned the respect of the men who followed her, including Dennis. Like Norma, Dennis placed the needs of the state above party. In 2007, Vernonia's schools were literally wiped out by flooding. Dennis, as co-chair of Ways and Means, was critical in getting the last $4.5 million to rebuild. It made no difference to him that Vernonia was served by two Democrats, Representative Brad Witt and myself. As Representative Witt recalled, Dennis never once tried to take credit for his actions to benefit Vernonia. On the other hand, Representative Witt and I later took an enormous amount of criticism when we appeared in a voter's pamphlet thanking Dennis for helping Vernonia. We had sinned by showing our public gratitude towards a Republican. As punishment, we were banned from something called the Democrat Party's Executive Committee. I joked at the time it was like getting kicked out of a club you didn't know you belonged to. For his part, Dennis responded with an amused smile. When you've flown a combat helicopter in Vietnam, rescuing wounded troops and transporting body bags, it changes your idea of what a bad day is. If you're of a certain generation, you likely know someone who was sent to Vietnam and came back a changed person, and not for the better. Dennis returned and treated his life as a gift. When I talked to him at Thanksgiving time last year, we chatted about his health a little bit. He believed he was looking cancer in the eye and hoped that cancer would blink. It didn't. I believe some of his optimism was because of the fact that he was a man of deep and profound faith. But I also believe it was because he survived Vietnam. He had seen the worst that can happen when men are required to carry out somebody else's political decisions. He carried that lesson with him to the end, which came too soon. Dennis Richardson still had work to do.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Now, my pleasure to introduce three of Secretary Richardson's children, Jennifer Vrains, Valerie Harmon, and Rachel Woolery, sing the Secretary's favorite hymn, Because I Have Been Given So Much, Given Much.
I live.
Thank you. Now, my pleasure to introduce Elder David Wright.
I have been listening to those women sing for a long time, since they were teenage girls. And it is wonderful to hear them sing again. Dennis Richardson has a sense of humor. Over the years, he has encouraged me to become more deeply involved in politics. I was willing to help him in small ways with his campaigns, but I told him that I wasn't really interested in doing more than that. He has to be laughing now, knowing that he had something to do with me out of my love and honor for his wishes, being in the seat of politics in Oregon in the legislative chamber of the state of Oregon. Dennis is a wonderful example of how our deeply held beliefs guide and govern so many of the choices we make in life. Many of his deeply held beliefs as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints center in the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and other books of Scripture. For example, one of these core beliefs is that we are each God's children with divine potential, dignity, and worth. This belief assumes automatic equality among us as fellow human beings. It does not allow for any feelings of superiority based on any of our differences. This belief drove Dennis to champion equality in education, encouragement of self-reliance, and accountability for agencies that serve the various populations in our city, state, and national governments. He certainly had his differences with others on the way to achieve those goals. When others did not see it his way, he maybe winced and he maybe murmured a little bit, but agreed to disagree without being disagreeable. Maybe his feelings were close to those of Abraham Lincoln's when he said, "With malice toward none, with charity toward all, and firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." The importance of family as the foundation of successful communities, states, and nations is another deeply held belief of Dennis Richardson. Children are a wonderful gift from a loving God. They are also a stewardship. Children raised and loved by parents who feel accountable for their future success are essential to successful current and future communities. Dennis and Kathy raised and loved 9 children. They helped those children feel their worth and their potential and filled them with confidence that they could achieve that potential. They also encouraged those wonderful children to see the joy of having a family themselves. This encouragement included a sense of confidence in the future based on preparation. I have never sensed a fear of the future with Dennis. For Dennis and Kathy, nothing seems more natural and desirable than seeing the love that they felt between each other and for their children continue into the next life. That is their firmly held belief. Dennis has moved on to another sphere of existence and undoubtedly waits anxiously for his family to finish their important tasks here, as he did. The Richardsons had some wonderful family reunions here. There are other wonderful reunions that await them, that await each of them in the future with Dennis, because death is not the end of family. Ongoing education is a belief that was essential to Dennis' success. He loved to learn. This found birth in his conviction that the glory of God is intelligence. He saw education as a key to eliminating ignorance. He had high expectations for educating himself, his family, and for any institution of public education. These expectations were accompanied by clear accountability for this public trust. As a soldier, Dennis was proud to have served his country in the military as a combat helicopter pilot. He made repeated attempts to help veterans receive the respect, the benefits, and attention they deserve. He had high expectations for the delivery of these key services for these heroes and implemented systems of accountability to see that these services were delivered. I saw this repeatedly in Southern Oregon as he looked out for veterans privately and helped in the creation of memorials for these men and women who gave their lives or limbs or minds for this country. He loved being with them. I could see his mantra of, "What shall I give for having received so much?" as he talked with and was the personal friend to so many fellow veterans. Can people change? Can they leave behind a life of addiction or abuse or crime and choose a different way? Dennis's core belief, based in a spiritual witness he possessed of the reality of Jesus Christ, is a resounding yes to these and other similar questions. Hope is a precious word. It is critical to wanting to change. Anyone can hope, and anyone can change. Dennis' example of continuous improvement and the need to change himself gave him hope that through education, training, belief in oneself, and self-awareness, one life can change from darkness to light, and then generations can change. These family transitional figures that leave behind their addictions, abuse, and lives of crime become what the prophet Isaiah said, "And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations. And thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in." On to another core belief. Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. The least of these were understood by Dennis to be the disenfranchised and vulnerable of our society. Children are almost always among the most vulnerable and exploited populations in this world. Education is key to their independence in the future and happiness now. By encouraging and holding accountable the education systems that are responsible for the education of our children in our state, Dennis showed in a broad way his concern for the future of our state and our country. Their futures are dependent on the quality of education in our state. They will be more self-reliant in the future when empowered by great education. Perhaps children become most vulnerable when they are removed from their families and enter into the foster care system. Dennis had high expectations for the way these children are taken care of in our state. A recent audit performed under his direction showed that we can improve as we help these vulnerable children. Also, Dennis encouraged adoption as the healthy solution for vulnerable children. Among his own children is Mary, who he and Kathy lovingly adopted, and is now a Richardson just like all the rest of them. Other vulnerable populations are some of our senior citizens. Dennis's children recount not just one, but many occasions in which he took them personally to care for a senior citizen who was lonely or needed help. He was personally involved in helping the homeless of our valley. He reached out to young men and young women who may have felt like they did not belong and befriended them and got them involved. He also was an advocate of those with disabilities. Dennis did not feel that government was the solution to most of our societal problems. He saw in various organizations outside of government the solutions to many problems that we face in Oregon. He developed working relationships with many of these organizations, including people of faith all over the state of Oregon. He encouraged people of faith and different religious organizations to work together and with other service groups and businesses to improve the quality of life of the disenfranchised and vulnerable in our state. He encouraged people of faith to find our many shared values and go to work together based on those shared values to help these disenfranchised and vulnerable groups. There are so many worthy causes that we can join together to advance and implement our shared values. Some groups in need make louder pleas than others. Listen to these wise words from world-renowned Harvard business professor and business leader Clayton Christensen. In your life, there are going to be constant demands for your time and attention. How are you going to decide which of those demands gets the resources? The trap many of us fall into is to allocate our time to whoever screams the loudest, and our talent to whatever offers us the fastest reward. That's a dangerous way to build a strategy," unquote. The core principles of Dennis Richardson have kept him from these traps in life. He has responded with his time and talent to what he has felt are the greatest priorities according to his core principles, not just who has screamed the loudest. We are better as a people and as a state for it. Thank you for this example, Dennis. I will miss you dearly.
Thank you. Now for the closing prayer by Representative Dwayne Stark.
Would you please stand and pray with me? Father God, today we are grieved by the loss of a great man, a friend, a mentor, someone that most of us would be thrilled to become half of. God, we ask for your comfort today for ourselves. We ask for your comfort for the family. And we ask that we would know your love in this time of tragedy in our minds. Lord, as Dennis would never allow a opportunity to teach to pass without imparting wisdom, God, I ask that we would learn lessons from his life. We would learn to have respect for one another, that we would have a respect for this institution of state government that he so loved. God, I ask that in honor of his memory, that we would become individuals like him, people who love our families, who hold them close, who hug them when they need to be hugged, who spend time with them and show them that we appreciate them. God, I ask that we would honor Dennis's memory by becoming people who serve others, not just on the public level, but also on the personal level in our daily lives like he did. God, those of us who knew him on a personal level also knew that he was a man of prayer. And so as he would often pray, I ask that you would give us wisdom in this building, especially the electeds, to know how to govern in a way that would honor you. That we would walk our lives with courage to always, no matter what the environment is, to always stand for what we believed in. And God, I ask that you would bring peace in this process, that even though we might disagree at times, that we could disagree civilly. And God, I ask these things as Dennis would ask these things, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. In closing, I want to thank those here who, in their words, their songs, their prayers, paid tribute to a man who we are here, who earned the love and the respect of everyone in this room and far beyond. A man who lived his life with a strong sense of duty to family, to God, to country, to state. And while we are all today diminished by Secretary Richardson's passing, we are also incredibly enriched by the life he led and the legacy he leaves us and the charge he gave us to continue to give back to make this community even better. He was also a man who gave details and who loved details. We have a few details in closing that are important. We will be adjourning in a very ordered way to the front steps of the Capitol for the military farewell in honor of Secretary Richardson's military service. I want you all to remain seated while the honor guard escorts Secretary Richardson's casket from the chamber. I'd like you then to allow the family, which includes a few rows to my left, to exit first, and the speakers to then follow. Then, in this order, those of you on the floor of the House gallery, starting from the front, to leave and exit, beginning at the front in the center aisle. Then, those of you in the gallery and the side aisles to remain seated until everyone from the floor have departed. And then those who are watching from the other, from the Senate chamber and elsewhere, to leave as well when the floor is cleared. Please, of those in the chamber, to use the ADA door to the left and the revolving doors on the first floor, while the guests in the overflow rooms, please wait to be dismissed, and you'll use the revolving door. Everything is clear, right? But, so we now again, thank you all for your attendance here, and as so many have said, Godspeed, Secretary Richardson. Thank you.